Let's summarize what we have learned, right? Especially focus on the hormones, the 4 hormones involved in regulating the kidney function, right? And also, it's not, we have learned about them, how they, influence the blood pressure, right? Now we kind of learn all the different pieces more in greater details. So it's a good time for us to step back a little bit and summarize, what we have learned so far about how each of those hormones are stimulated, where they are generated, right? And where they are going to have their action. Let's start with the most important one, renin-angiotensin system. Well, if you actually notice, we haven't really talked about the renin and angiotensin in the electrolyte balance, right? With the 3 hormones we mentioned so far that directly act on the nephrons, kidney cells, influence the reabsorption of the electrolytes and water. There's none of them is running angiotensin system. But that's the first one we're going to talk about to summarize. And this is the most important hormone. And how so, right? Let's see. Let's walk it through. Keep that in mind. Okay, so it's a good time for us to summarize what we have learned. So where does the renin well, we know this system is because of the liver, right? Secrete, continuous secrete angiotensin 2, and has to be cleaved, converted by renin into angiotensin 1, which is still inactive, right? And then it's going to be then converted to angiotensin 2, which is the active hormone by ACE. That's ACE is from this reaction happens in the lungs, right? So what's really relevant for us is the renin for the urinary system is renin production, right, by the juxtaglomerular apparatus, and specifically by the granular cells. So then let's see what triggers the granular cells secrete renin. So it tends to be if there's low blood pressure, right? So that's a trigger for the renin. And could be also be stimulated by the sympathetic deviation from the nervous system. Another trigger is actually remember the granular cells are stimulated by the macular denser cells of DCT. That's why we have this apparatus, right? It's the the macular denser cells can sense in the DCT, in the distal tubule, right? The fluid, if they are low in sodium chloride concentration, that means you have the tubular fluid pretty diluted, right? So that means then the blood volume could be low because of the increased urine output. So therefore, that's another stimuli for the granular cells to increase, to stimulate, to generate renin. And renin is going to come in, right, and generate the angiotensin 2, which is essentially, not directly, but essentially eventually generate angiotensin 2's active hormone. And let's see what angiotensin 2 is doing. One thing is stimulates the systemic blood vessels to be vasoconstrict, right? So by vasoconstriction, it also actually constricts the afferent arterial, right? The afferent arterial constriction is going to decrease the GFR. Remember that last filtrate is going to be generated, right? That's directly influencing the filtration, right? Filtrate production. But it also works on the hypothalamus, the thirst center of the hypothalamus. So then, to increase the fluid intake. And in addition, it also promotes the ADH production from the posterior release, at least from the posterior pituitary. And ADH is a hormone that directly acts on the distal tubule, right, of the nephrons to increase the water reabsorption. It also acts on the adrenal gland to promote the production of aldosterone. Then aldosterone is the one directly work on the principal cells to increase both the sodium and the water uh, uh, reabsorption. So even though we actually haven't seen renin, right, involved in water or sodium reabsorption directly, but it did so by influencing more upstream of that, influencing the production of ADH and aldosterone, right? And so also, increase the fluid uptake by activating the thirst center. So actually, the renin angiotensin system is the most powerful one, just because it's activated multiple, hormonal and nervous system at the same time, right? Also influence the GFR, right? So then together adding, all those effects together, is so powerful. Then it's going to increase the blood pressure by increase the blood volume, increase the vasoconstriction, also increase the blood pressure, right? So then that's why we talk about this first. And if you notice, renin is produced by the juxtaglomerular granular cells. Well, the second one we're going to look at is the ADH, where let's look at what actually stimulated angiotensin 2 stimulated, right? We just talk about low blood volume stimulated, and also the increased blood osmolarity, right? So those three are the triggers for the hypothalamus to synthesize and the posterior pituitary to release ADH, right? And then how it acts, right? So it acts on the principal cells, increase the water, right, reabsorption, and also high dose of ADH also vasoconstrict the blood vessels. It can also act on the thirst center, increase the fluid intake. So for the aldosterone, you can see the effect of the aldosterone is more limited, right, than the other two we talked about. It doesn't work on the thirst center. It doesn't work on the systemic blood vessels, but it works on the principal cells of the distal tubule and collecting ducts, right? So of course, the stimulus kind of similar, right? We talk about angiotensin 2 stimulate aldosterone, and the electrolyte, right? Balance basically tipped off the balance also stimulates aldosterone, because aldosterone increases the sodium the reabsorption and the potassium excretion, right, at the same time. So again, where does it synthesize? Is actually the adrenal gland cortex. Lastly, let's look at the one, right, hormone that opposing the other three function. So because there's only one hormone opposing the other three, you can see the AMP also has a broad, a number of effectors, right? Has a broad effect on different organs. So let's start with the stimuli. So if you have an increased blood volume, that's a direct kind of stimuli, right? Because AMP, atrial, A for atrial, that means it's secreted actually from the atrium of the heart, and atrium is where the blood returns to the heart. And if there's stretch, right, on the atrium wall, that's going to be a direct stimulate to the receptors, and on the atrium wall, and it's going to basically promotes the atrial release AMP into the blood. AMP then going to work on the systemic blood vessel, making more vasodilation, right? This is the opposite of the other three. I mean, especially renin, angiotensin 2, right? And then on the kidney, it increased the GFR by, because all that vasodilation also vasodilates the afferent tubule, right, of the glomerulus. That's, increase the GFR. But then also on the principal cells, right, it's actually inhibit the work of aldosterone. So then inhibits the reabsorption, so increase the loss of the sodium and water in urine. So the result is you increase the urine output, decrease the water, the blood volume and blood pressure. In addition, it's actually acts on the sodium, on the kidney, also decrease the release of renin. So it's kind of going back circle, right? Decrease the release of renin, then interfere with the action of the angiotensin 2, then basically that's why you can have one opposing hormone, but it can take out the action of all the other three.